Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is One Piece East Blue Saga Logtown Arc, episode 53, The Legend Has Begun, Head to the Grand Line. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So in this episode, it begins with the escape. Nami and Usopp are heading towards the ship as they believe the Navy may be there, and they arrive as Moji is trying and failing to light the ship on fire because all of his matches are wet because it's raining, but he still keeps trying anyways. Just after they arrive, however, then the Navy does in fact arrive, and the Navy tries to sink the ship, but they manage to start pulling away while they plan to pick up the others along the way. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, of course, are running away from the square, back in the square. Smoker manages to capture Alvida and Buggy, who were trying to go after Luffy, as well as the other pirates, and they use a sea stone net to keep them contained, while he then gets his Billower bike to go after Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro. First, they run into Tashigi, who of course is upset with Zoro for not telling her who he was, and accuses him of lying to her. However, he points out that she never actually asked his name, so he didn't lie. He just, didn't tell her his name. But as we know from their interactions, she didn't really give him a chance to either. But they end up fighting, and Zoro, when she starts accusing him of going easy on her for being a woman, he then reveals, no, you just look like my dead friend, and happen to be saying the same things that she said about being a female swordswoman. And then Tashigi gets upset because he calls her a copycat. And she's like, shouldn't I be upset? She copied me, blah, blah, blah. But they have their little thing. But then Zoro does manage to get away after a timely gust of wind. Then Sanji and Luffy run into Smoker. Sanji continues down to the harbor where he is able to help Usopp and Nami. And Usopp even jumps off the ship to help Sanji when the Marines on the shore start to get overwhelming. Luffy faces Smoker. Because of the nature of Smoker's devil fruit, Luffy doesn't really have much of a shot, and he does end up losing. However, luckily Dragon interferes and lets Luffy go, stopping Smoker from continuing the fight. So Luffy then is able to go. All of them gather at the shore. Luffy rockets them onto the ship, where they then do a barrel launching ceremony. And at the end, Dragon doesn't really answer why he helped Luffy, though we as the audience with foresight, because this is a rewatch, know why he helped Luffy. And then Smoker decides to abandon his post in Logtown in order to chase after Luffy going forward. And that's where this episode ends. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we'll now rank the episode. As always, we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking, followed by the personal ranking. So, mostly objective rank values. A reminder that it's mostly objective because emotion isn't involved, however, bias and judgment can still apply. In this episode, we had 2 points each for our resolved battles. We had Smoker versus Alvida and the Buggy Pirates, Zoro versus Tashigi, and Luffy versus Smoker, all getting resolved. Then we're 3 points. We have the multi-arc supporting character development, which is Buggy and Alvida being captured, and then escaping due to a seemingly divine intervention gust of wind. And they decide to go to the Grand Line, also chasing after Luffy. Then we have our multi-arc supporting character growth, where Buggy reveals his Barbar Buggy, which is basically where he reconfigures his body parts into like a little buggy cart. Alvida, the Suba Suba Tracks, which is basically her using a ramp to get some momentum and then using the slipperiness of her skin due to the fruit to basically skate. Then we have Smoker, and he reveals Whiteout, Cage Shot, which is the sea stone net gun, the Billow Bike, and the White Blow, which is another power that he uses in the fight with Luffy. Those are all worth 3 points. And then we have the impactful / memorable, moment line, etc., which of course is the barrel launching ceremony where they all put their foot on a barrel and basically state the dream that they are hoping to accomplish in the Grand Line before they then break the barrel with their heels. And that's very iconic and memorable scene. One of the, what I would call like an important scene where they're reaffirming their goals and dreams. And then the negative, of course, is negative messaging or behavior. And once again, it's Smoker because he decides that it's appropriate to abandon his post. And when his like subordinates are like, hey, don't abandon your post, he's like, don't give me orders and tell that to headquarters. They can't give me orders. And he decides he's gonna now go chase Luffy, and that's his personal goal. So obviously that too is negative. This final episode of this arc is a 10 out of 10. When more than one episode has the same score on our mostly objective ranking, we do rank them in episode order. So that brings our final mostly objective ranking for this arc to, in first, the town of the beginning and the end, arrival at Logtown. Second, this episode, the legend has begun, head to the Grand Line. Third, Sandai Katetsu and Yabashiri, Zoro's new swords, and the female sergeant major. Fourth, Buggy's revenge, the man who smiles at the execution platform. Fifth, a burning culinary battle, Sanji versus the gorgeous chef. And then in sixth place, we have Usopp versus Daddy the Father, showdown at high noon. For my personal ranking, I also really enjoy this episode. I do think that there's even more divine intervention involved. Obviously, the rain pouring down not only puts out the execution platform fire, but prevents Moji from setting the boat on fire, which protects their ship, allowing them to escape. Then, when they're in the battle, once Dragon stops Smoker from fully defeating Luffy, all the rain suddenly stops, and a gigantic gust of green wind shoots through the city, which frees Alvida and Buggy, because I do believe that Buggy is meant to be connected with Luffy and such, because obviously he also gets some protection from the divine intervention here. And Impel Down is a masterpiece, and Buggy, of course, is a main player there. But they do get captured and escape thanks to this massive wind. Zoro's able to escape thanks to the wind. Luffy's able to escape thanks to the wind. And then it's also revealed by Smoker that Luffy came into town and then disappeared from the town on the same day, and it happens to be the day that Roger was executed. I think it was either 20 or 22 years ago. So again, it's all lining up for divine intervention. Everything's meant to be. And of course, we got multiple battles. We've got the escape. We've got the storm, which I love storms. So any stormy mood is, in my opinion, excellent atmosphere. So we had all of that. Dragon intervenes. We do get him named this episode with them calling him Dragon, but we still don't know his connection to Luffy yet, though he does save Luffy. Oh, I just really enjoy this episode, and of course I'm glad that Buggy escaped. And then Buggy, of course, decides to go to the Grand Line. Smoker goes to the Grand Line, and here's the thing. Is Smoker the best Marine out there? Not really. In fact, he's probably pretty bad at his job because, like we saw in the last episode, he potentially put civilians at risk by letting the pirates play out their execution. This episode, he's like fully abandoning his post and this town that he's in charge of and meant to be protecting from pirates in order to go chasing after Luffy. However, having said that, I really like Smoker as a character. I think he's awesome. And so I don't have a problem with him leaving his post and chasing after Luffy because, of course, that makes him a recurring character. And when I really like a character, I love when they recur because then we get to see them over and over again. And so I'm not upset that he abandoned his post, but obviously I had to take points for it. But that's neither here nor there. That was the previous list. Either way, Love this episode. I love the bit of comedy in there as well when, Zoro's freaking out over Tashigi's face and Luffy rockets them all onto the ship. It also has that very iconic moment with the launching ceremony. Now, having said that, the launching ceremony I do feel was kind of misplaced in this episode. I believe in the manga it probably does directly follow their leaving of Logtown. However, in the anime they put in a filler arc, which is the next arc, to round out East Blue. And I feel like I would rather have this launching ceremony at the end of that filler arc when they're actually nearing the entrance to the Grand Line and their next journey, rather than having it here before, and then we have that big gap before entering the Grand Line of 8 episodes of the next arc. I just feel like I would personally have preferred that they have moved it so that it was right before they enter the Grand Line. They're reaffirming their dreams just because of that filler gap. And I know that they were planning the filler gap. There's no way they wouldn't have. It was 8 episodes, original story. It would have been in the works, so they would have known it was coming. So just for the pacing, I would have rather it been at the end of that. But I still think it is an iconic and memorable moment, and I do love the moment when they're all reaffirming their dreams as they're about to enter the next stage. And so I did give this episode a 10 out of 10 because it is a really good episode, and my complaints really are just minor about it. But that brings us to our final scoring for the personal ranking for this arc, as this was the last episode. And in first place, we have this episode, The Legend Has Begun, Head to the Grand Line. Second place was Buggy's Revenge, The Man Who Smiles at the Execution Platform. Third place, Sandai Kotetsu and Yabashiri, Zoro's New Swords and the Female Sergeant Major. Episode 4, The Town of the Beginning and the End, Arrival at Logtown. Episode 5, A Burning Culinary Battle, Sanji versus the Gorgeous Chef. And then episode 6 is Usopp versus Daddy the Father, Showdown at High Noon. So, our saga ranking so far, as this was the last episode of this arc, we now have this arc's final score, and it is going to be placed in the saga rankings where it officially lies. Now, I did not foresee this happening. The reason I was using decimal points was because I did not think that with the decimal points, we'd have something that scored identically to another arc. Clearly, I'm not great at math because apparently it was highly possible, though unlikely, but I am going to follow the same rule that I do with the episodes, and if more than one episode has the same score, they're ranked in air order. So in the case of the mostly objective ranking for the sagas or the arcs as well, I am going to be ranking it in order of airing if it happens to have the same score. So, on our mostly objective ranking, in first we had the Romance Dawn arc with 86.67%. Second is our Lung Park arc with 76.67%. This episode, the Logtown arc, also 76.67%, and because it aired after, that is why it is in third place. Then fourth place is Orangetown arc with 76%, the Baretti arc in fifth place with 68.33%, Syrup Village arc is in sixth place with 64%, and then Buggy Side Story arc has 55% and is currently in seventh. On the personal ranking side, in first place, we have the Buggy Side Story arc with 90%, Arlong Park arc in second at 76%, Orangetown arc in third at 74%, Romance Dawn arc is in fourth, 66.67%. This arc came in fifth, so Logtown arc final score was 37 out of 60, which brought it to 61.67%. Baretti arc was in sixth with 52.5%. And then Syrup Village arc is in seventh with 49%. And I realize I forgot to state it, but on the Logtown arc, final score on the mostly objective was 46 out of 60. Now, obviously, when we're scoring for the sagas, these scores determined based on the percentage that the arc had. So on the mostly objective ranking, because we are above 76% but below 80%, it scores 7 points. And then on the arc for personal side. On the personal side for the arc, it was over 61%, but it was under 65%, and that brings it a score of 4 points. So now we come to our series ranking so far, and the East Blue Saga has now increased to 41 out of 80 for the mostly objective ranking, and on the personal ranking, it has increased from 30 to 34 out of 80 with this arc's completion. Really exciting. After the next arc, we're actually going to have the final score for East Blue and be starting on the next saga, which will be amazing. But for now, with that, we have now rewatched and ranked One Piece East Blue Saga Logtown Arc Episode 53. The legend has begun. Head to the Grand Line. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.